Yo, Lito Lotto coming back down to earth here, and Happy New Year's, guys. I hope you have a great 2025, and I hope you suck this year's dick dry. Just suck it dry. Fondle the balls too while you're at it. This is your year to accomplish whatever it is that you want, and I hope you do so. Anyway, so I have been noticing a war brewing among the gaming community, one that we have never seen before, where the woke agenda has started to spread like an infection, even more crucial than the one we've seen in Raccoon City. A war that consists of blue-haired, DEI pronoun-seeking far leftists that desire nothing more than freedom for all, even though the concept of controlling the social narrative completely contradicts that. Hell, they have so much blue-haired individuals gathered in one spot, you would have thought this was a Jinx rally. Now they are currently at war against the monster-drinking COD lobby veterans where verbal banter knew no bounds and was almost always racist, degenerate agrophobes who might also be sexist at the same time. They definitely are. And both of these communities are on the battlefield that is the internet. And it has continued to escalate as more gaming content has gotten progressively more woke, as some might say. Now, I believe this beef between these two polarizing sides has been cooking for quite some time, but similar to the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, one of the defining movements that was the catalyst for this war started with the announcement of Assassin's Creed Shadows, where both a black samurai and a woman were the main characters for the game. This would then incite a riot and send the gaming community into a bonanza-filled frenzy that consisted of metaphorical pitchforks, questionable Discord logs, and throw in a racial slur in there just for contextual accuracy, shall we? Hell, even people who didn't play the Assassin's Creed games were upset. I mean, what is Asmongold doing? Blood does not know the lore of Desmond Miles. Now, I personally felt like this controversy was a bit blown out of proportions due to the fact that the Assassin's Creed franchise has dealt with many different leading roles throughout their many installments, and although it was imperative to build a world around some level of historical accuracy, its number one priority was always to create an immersive fictional story with the inclusion of historical elements, like a historical playground, if you will. Because if they wanted to follow a strict guideline of history filled with primary and secondary sources, then you wouldn't have been able to fight the Pope who wielded a magical apple of Eden at the end of Assassin's Creed 2. You just wouldn't have. Now, I'm not even saying the game is going to be good, but I think a lot of people who are aggressively against it might be doing a bit too much. You know, the game hasn't even come out yet. You can't even provide any sort of criticism at this very moment. You know, you might just be racist. And it has only gotten progressively more hostile and rampant in the YouTube, Twitter, and Reddit comments, where people seem to be physically upset that they might pop a blood vessel. Because during the gaming awards that occurred last month in December, there were several announcements that were presented to the public where some people acted as though Judgment Day was upon us. The trumpets blaring where the four horsemen gathered in unison. Todd Howard Ollie was one of them.
Who's laughing now? Yes, I was in the chess club.
Where two brand new spanking games were introduced. One for The Witcher 4 and the other for an entirely new IP, Intergalactic. And in both of these AAA titles, there would be a female protagonist as the lead playable character, which would further solidify the deep-rooted rage that these established gaming consumers had over the woke agenda, per se, that they felt has been plaguing the community that they've known and loved for so long. Now, granted, I'm sure the discourse has nothing to do with Ciri being the main focus for The Witcher 4, because for anybody who is actually an advocate for the games and the lore would know just how important of a role she has played in the franchise thus far. And on top of that, her magical abilities can provide for a fresh, new, innovative way to kind of play the games from a mechanic standpoint. But wait, there are people who are upset that she is the leading role. A main controversial issue, though, for these announcements is that these women are a bit too masculine for the male gaze. I mean, come on, guys, where are the boobies? You know? Did they forget that a vast majority of these men who play these games has mastered the art to play it with one hand on the controller? If we just take a gander at their successful franchises with female leads, most of their women are built like a BBL paradise. You know? Have we strayed too far from the gods? Have we merely marginalized ourselves into a hole where we can no longer sexualize these fictional characters to make up for our sexless lives? Now all we got is G.I. Jane and a broad-shouldered Halsey. I'm obviously joking, by the way, but this is honestly one of the current conflicts with these games is that these women are not masturbation worthy. Like, legitimately, that's what it is. At this point, it might be just blatant sexism for a percentage of these people. This group of incels went as far as yassifying these women to emphasize their feminine potential, which might be a mental illness, if we really think about it. Like, realistically speaking, women who are a bit more rough around the edges and that are physically more sturdy, like Rhea Ripley and Brienne of Tarth, might be more enticed to pursue these rigorous ventures in comparison to women with tiny waists and massive milk jugs. You know, like, let's be real here, that is back pain waiting to happen. Not only do you have to worry about being over encumbered from your back size, now you got the double D's weighing you down too. Double the stress. And also, Rhea Ripley and Brienne of Tarth are both beautiful women. You don't have to be petite and small to be considered attractive. Now, I've already pleaded my case for Witcher and Ciri, but we have to understand, with Intergalactic, one of the biggest and most successful developers created this game, where before they even play the trailer, they highlighted all of their accomplishments just to showcase to us that they don't miss. They flex on us like XUC flexing his watch every time he gets in an argument. Like, this has been a trustworthy franchise so far. On top of that, we have yet to see the gameplay or any actual footage to generate any level of judgment or harsh criticism at this very moment. But yet, we sit here in the midst of the battlefield on the Pillars of Autumn, where the question then arises: has gaming been steering towards a more woke narrative over the years? And from what I have researched, it hasn't. And the reason I say that is because I feel like it has been easier to highlight a game that emphasizes these negative qualities that some people might despise, rather than appreciate the games that didn't have this so-called DEI representation, which, if we actually think about it, has been dominating the gaming space. I mean, let's see 2024, for example. You had Helldivers 2, Dragon's Dogma 2, the Outer Ring DLC, Tekken 8, another Crab's Adventure, Black Myth Wukong, Black Ops 6, Path of Exile 2, Marvel Rivals, and many more. There was barely any games that had this woke narrative, and even if they did, who gives a fuck? You literally had an option to have gay sex with an ambiguous alien in Mass Effect 2. I don't want to hear it. There have always been elements of DEI in a lot of games that we play. We can take Baldur's Gate 3, for example. You can play as a trans character and have sexual relations with a demon woman with horns, and it is one of the most successful games to exist in the last 5 years. And it's unfortunate because I have been seeing a consistent theme that exists where people are arguing that games that are trying to push this woke agenda are all flopping worse than the Borderlands movie. But what games are exactly pushing this agenda? If we really think about it, you know, some people are saying Forsaken, Concord, Suicide Squad, and Dragon Age Veilguard have all failed terribly because they contain these DEI themes, when in reality, a lot of them don't. All Forsaken had was a female lead with a poorly written story and game mechanics. Concord was just another bland and visually unappealing hero shooter that just couldn't compete with the others, but there wasn't really any DEI elements that was marketed towards the game. A lot of people were saying that the character designs were definitely pushing for a far left nefarious scheme, which might be slightly accurate and might be what they were doing, but if I'm going to be honest, these characters are just dog shit. There is no sense of originality, very generic, and the designs are just awful. That you would expect this game to be in a 1-minute cameo in a poorly written family film that has either Kevin Hart or Mark Wahlberg as a star. While Suicide Squad was just a shit game with shit graphics that you would have thought it was an Xbox One launch game from 2014. The only issue that people truly had with that game that made them assume that there were like DEI elements to it was the fact that Harley Quinn wasn't sexually appealing. That's it. Now for Dragon Age Veilguard, and this one was another controversial game that took the internet into a Category 5 hurricane when it was released, due to there being an option in the character creation where you are able to get chest scars, implying that you got chest surgery for when you transitioned into a woman into a man. I think this one was very, very minor, because it's not like there's a big part of the game where you have to get butt ass naked and show off all your goodies for all the NPCs to see. I mean, you're most likely going to be wearing armor and upgrading that armor as the game progresses. But what it did was reveal itself to these gaming degenerates that this game was most likely going to push this narrative throughout the game, which, I mean, there was a big option in the beginning of the storyline, if I could recall, where you can choose your gender identity, which I personally felt was unnecessary because it has no true significance to the game whatsoever. But from then on there, other than the non-binary companion that you get eventually, there was barely, if any, DEI components that were in the game at all. I mean, I played 17 hours of this game and I still have yet to reach the non-binary companion, where this controversial storyline takes place where this character comes out to their parents as non-binary. So it's a very small percentage of gameplay that we even engage in this woke agenda. The problem with this game wasn't those elements, but that it no longer had the ambience of its predecessors, you know, and it seemed to aim more for a Disney Marvel-like writing that ultimately fell flat. The game overall was just bad, and as an avid Dragon Age fan, I was extremely disappointed with the outcome. Now, I think a major aspect that these games all shared was that they were boring and lackluster. They had no sense of creativity or direction to produce an actual enjoyable game for the consumer. The only game, though, that included these DEI themes was Dragon Age. And for me personally, it was such a small percentage that I actually didn't mind it, but I could see why people would. Once again, for me, it was the shitty storyline and dual repetitive gameplay mechanics that made me ultimately uninstall the game. Now, I think the issue here lies in these AAA corporations, the publishers that are hiring a team who are not necessarily passionate about games, which then in effect leads us to these monotonous, soulless games. And if they are passionate, they have to work under these harsh routine-like conditions where they have a time limit to push out these games to meet the shareholder demands, which in turn makes the game conventionally bad. You know, I think it is a lot more complex than just saying that they're pushing out this woke narrative, though, which also might be the case for a small percentage of these games. I'm not saying that it isn't. I mean, we've seen it happen in TV shows and or movies. One that comes to mind in particular for me is Gen V, which is a spin-off series of The Boys, where one character has the ability to turn into a boy and a girl. And now, the only issue I had with this character is that they were in the top 5 of the Superhero Academy, where their ability was nothing special. You have literal shapeshifters having the power to turn into anyone they want, and all this character could do was turn into one boy and one girl. How in the world are you top 5 out of all the superheroes? How? Which I believe is the issue, right? It's when it becomes inorganic and obvious. What they were trying to do with this character was build a story for non-binary people in the world and kind of make them feel accepted, because I think this individual in Gen V was having issues with their parents, which is something that I believe that non-binary people go through, but it's inorganic. There was no reason this individual was top 5. There's no reason this individual was in the position that they were in. It's inorganic, and it makes things obvious of what they're trying to do. They're trying to push this narrative. So I can see exactly what these people and these gaming degenerates are upset about. So in instances like these, I could get it. I would even go as far as saying EA and BioWare did in fact try to push a narrative through Dragon Age, or at least make non-binary people feel accepted, which I don't think was that bad. I think the way they approached it was okay. Once again, the issue is how they go about it. You know, I don't think there is this sinister agenda to turn the gaming industry into this far left shit show where there's nothing but pronouns and disappointed parents. I think if done right, as we've seen with Cyberpunk or even Baldur's Gate, then there wouldn't be an issue with the addition of these DEI elements incorporated in these games, especially if it's done in an organic way. I think another great example of this is how they implemented Player 120 in Squid Game Season 2. I think what the old heads of the gaming community, the ones who've built this foundation, are worried about is that they don't want this world that they've known and loved and appreciated for so long to be tainted and is, in a sense, colonized or controlled by these foreigners who have absolutely no idea who their core demographic is. You know, it's the fear that is instilled within them, because anything that remotely disturbs the peace of these cherished franchises will ultimately open that door for other franchises to be plagued by this woke virus and in the end dominate the gaming space. So I believe this is why they fight so hard for this purpose. You know, it's so that there is no change in the world that they admired for so long, since they were young even. So I understand it, but I do believe that some change is okay. And once again, if done right, then it's okay to include these topics, especially if it makes another group of individuals involved and accepted, if it's done right though. But once again, I think this is such a small percentage of games, typically AAA titles, that have the tendency to have these issues. I mean, if we look at the disaster that is Diablo 4, then we could see it's not just games that are woke that have been terrible in recent times. Hell, throw Overwatch 2 in there, for example. But there is such a vast library of games to explore that have released in the last year, and in the upcoming year, we have such a diverse collection of new games, like Monster Hunter Wilds, that we can look forward to. So, I don't know, I just kind of wanted to rant about that. I thought that would be a good topic for a video. Anyways, I hope you kicked this year's ass. That's all from me. I'm off to another dimension. See ya.